My son ignored me for 12 years until the day my patent sold for $4 million. The morning the wire transfer cleared, he showed up at my front door in Vancouver with his wife, 2 suitcases, and a smile I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. He said, "Dad, we've come to help you manage all of this." I looked at him for a long moment, then stepped aside and let them in. And I did exactly what I'd been planning to do since the moment I saw his face on my porch. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is, where you are right now. The call came on a Tuesday morning in November. I was in my workshop in the basement of my house in North Vancouver, the same workshop where I'd spent the better part of 20 years refining a pressure-sensing valve system for industrial pipelines. The kind of work that doesn't make you famous, the kind of work that doesn't make you rich, either, until one day it does. Mr. Cole. The voice on the phone belonged to a contracts lawyer at a Calgary-based energy firm called Meridian Industrial. We'd like to finalize the licensing agreement. The board approved the full offer. $4.2 million. Payable in a single transfer within 10 business days. I sat down on my workshop stool. I set the phone against my thigh for a moment and looked at the drafting table covered in papers, at the valve prototype in the corner, at the yellow sticky notes I'd been moving around for 2 decades. $4.2 million. Mr. Cole? Are you still there? Yes, I said. Send me the paperwork. I'm 68 years old. I spent 31 years as a mechanical engineer at a municipal infrastructure firm in Vancouver, managing water systems, bridges, utility upgrades. When I retired at 62, I had a modest pension, a paid-off house in North Vancouver I'd bought with my late wife Patricia in 1991, and a patent application that had been sitting with the Canadian Intellectual Property Office for 7 years. The patent was for a valve system I'd designed in my 50s, something that could detect microfractures in high-pressure industrial pipelines before they became failures. Unglamorous work. The kind of thing that matters enormously to people who move natural gas across Alberta and almost nobody else. Meridian had been circling the patent for 2 years. When the deal finally closed, the news moved through a small circle of engineering industry contacts, then made it onto a regional business wire. I didn't think much of it. I'd lived quietly since Patricia died in 2019. I had my workshop, my neighbor Gerald, who came over on Thursdays for chess, my volunteer work at the engineering mentorship program at the local community college, and a small reading group that met at the library on alternating Wednesdays. That was my life. It was enough. My son found out the same way everyone else did. He read it online. His name is Marcus. He's 41 years old, and for 12 years, he had not called me, visited me, or sent me so much as a message on my birthday. The last time I saw Marcus was in the spring 12 years ago, when he was 29. He had come to this same house with his then-girlfriend, now wife, Renee, to present me with what he called an opportunity. He had been working in real estate development in Calgary, and he wanted me to sign over the rights to my patent at that point, still pending approval to a numbered company he had formed with 2 business partners. In exchange, I would receive a 10% equity stake in the company, with no guaranteed payment, no timeline, and no legal protection if the company dissolved. I had said no. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, Renee beside him with her hand on his arm, and he told me that I was being selfish, that I had always been selfish, that my whole career had been about following rules and managing things, and never taking a real risk, and that this was the reason I had never amounted to anything meaningful, that I had spent my life in mediocrity, and now I was choosing to keep him in it too. I told him that I had designed the patent on my own time, with my own materials, in my own workshop, and that it was mine. He stood up and said that Patricia would have understood. He used his mother's name as a weapon. She had been gone for 6 years by then, 7 since her diagnosis, and he knew exactly what he was doing. They left before dinner. The door didn't slam. That was almost worse. It just clicked shut. I called him twice that first year. The calls went to voicemail. I sent a letter on his birthday the second year. Just a short note, nothing demanding. It came back unopened. After the third year, I stopped. Patricia had taught me that you could love someone completely and still recognize when continuing to reach for them was only injuring yourself further. I made peace with it. Or I told myself I had. The wire transfer cleared on a Friday. By Monday morning, I had an appointment at TD Private Banking in downtown Vancouver with a wealth advisor named Christine Hoang, who had the kind of calm, organized intelligence I respected. We spent 2 hours going over asset protection structures, investment allocations, and what she called estate planning priorities. I took notes, the same way I had always taken notes in my engineering work. Methodical, documented, precise. With an amount at this level, Christine said, folding her hands on the desk, the first priority is legal clarity around your estate. Family situations can become complicated very quickly. I understand that, I said. I have one son. We haven't spoken in 12 years. He found out about the sale through a business news wire. She didn't blink. I'd recommend connecting with an estate lawyer as soon as possible. This week, if you can manage it. I already had an appointment. I had made it the same afternoon Meridian called. Her name was Dr. Evelyn Marsh, a wills and estates lawyer in Burnaby with 30 years of practice. Her office smelled of old books and cold tea. She was direct, unhurried, and extremely good at her job. Under British Columbia's Wills, Estates and Succession Act, she told me, adult children in Canada can challenge a will on the basis of adequate provision. It's called a wills variation claim. However, the courts consider the nature of the relationship, the circumstances of the estrangement, and whether the deceased had a moral obligation to provide. 12 years of documented no contact significantly weakens any such claim. Can I document the estrangement retroactively? You can document what you remember. But any contemporaneous evidence voicemails, the returned letter, records of your outreach, and his non-response would strengthen your position considerably. I went home and spent an evening going through an old filing cabinet. I found the returned envelope. I found notes I had written to myself after our last conversation, dated. I found a birthday card I had bought for him 4 years after he left, wrote, and never sent, because I no longer had an address. I photographed everything and emailed the files to Dr. Marsh. 3 days after the deal closed, the doorbell rang at 11 inches the morning. I was upstairs when I heard it. I came down slowly, looked through the window beside the front door. A rented SUV was in the driveway. 2 large suitcases were visible through the rear window. Marcus stood on my porch. He was wearing a jacket I didn't recognize, his hair shorter than I remembered. Renee stood half a step behind him, arms crossed loosely, her expression arranged into something designed to look warm. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even grief. Exactly. It was something closer to recognition. The same feeling I used to get in my engineering work when a system behaved exactly as the physics said it would. I opened the door. Dad. Marcus smiled. It was a good smile. He had always had a good smile. We were in town and we thought we've been thinking about you since we saw the news. We're so glad for you. Genuinely. We wanted to come and see you in person, Renee said. It's been too long. I looked at the suitcases in the car. Come in, I said. The reason I let them in was not weakness. I want to be clear about that. I had spent 3 days preparing for exactly this possibility. I had already spoken to my lawyer. I had already restructured my estate. I had already hired a private investigator named David Fong, a retired RCMP officer who worked out of Coquitlam and had been recommended to me by Dr. Marsh as thorough and discreet. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. And to know that, I needed them close. They settled into the guest room. Marcus hadn't asked. He had simply carried the suitcases upstairs and opened the first door he tried. I followed behind, watching, and said nothing. I noted the time on my phone. That evening, over a dinner I cooked, roasted chicken, potatoes, the kind of meal Patricia used to make Marcus talked. He was good at talking. He told me about their life in Calgary, the real estate market, some development projects that were, in his word, complicated right now. He told me that Renee had stopped working her marketing contract job to focus on some online business that he described vaguely and twice. He told me that Vancouver was incredibly expensive, which was true and beside the point. I asked about their apartment in Calgary. He paused, just briefly enough that I noticed. We're between places, actually. Just for a few months. The timing worked out that we could come visit. I nodded and said that made sense. The next morning I called David Fong and told him to accelerate whatever he had. Over the following days, they settled in the way I had expected. Marcus began making suggestions about the house. The kitchen could be modernized. The basement workshop was wasted space. The backyard could be developed. Renee reorganized the living room while I was out without asking, moving a bookshelf that had been in its position since Patricia and I placed it there together in 1998. I photographed it when I came home. I moved it back after they went to bed. On the fourth day, Marcus sat down across from me at the kitchen table with his laptop. "I want to talk to you about something," he said. "I've been developing a concept for a property tech startup. There's a real gap in the Calgary commercial real estate market right now. I've done a lot of the groundwork. What I need is seed capital to get to the next stage. 300,000 would get us to a point where we could attract institutional investors." He turned the laptop toward me. There was a slide deck. It had a logo. I told him I would think about it. His jaw tightened, just slightly. "It's not a huge amount in the context of what you received," he said. I said I'd think about it. I said, pleasantly. That evening, I called David Fong. "I've got most of it," he said. "You'll want to sit down." I sat. Their Calgary apartment was 8 months behind on rent. An eviction notice had been filed in September, 2 months before the Meridian deal became public. Total consumer debt across both of them, between credit cards and an unsecured personal loan, $61,000. Marcus had been involved in 2 previous failed business registrations. One had resulted in a judgment against him for unpaid contractor invoices. Renee's online business had been inactive for 8 months. Their combined declared income for the previous tax year had been under $48,000. They had nowhere to go before I had money. That was the fact beneath everything else. I thanked David and asked him to put it all in writing. I kept notes that week. Every request, every comment, every moment when the performance slipped and the calculation underneath it showed through. Marcus testing whether I'd respond to flattery. Renee mentioning how much she'd always admired how Patricia ran the house, as if invoking her name would soften something. Marcus asking about my will framed as concern, phrased as curiosity, but asking, on the 7th day, I told them I had decided to change my estate plans. We were at dinner again. I had made the same roasted chicken. I poured wine. I told them that I had been thinking hard about the past 12 years, that I believed people could change, and that I wanted to rebuild something real before I was gone. I said that I intended to update my will to include Marcus as a significant beneficiary, but that I needed to feel confident the relationship was genuine and not circumstantial. I told them that there was a community college in North Vancouver, where I volunteered with an engineering mentorship program for young students who couldn't afford private tutoring. I wanted them to participate for 3 months, twice weekly, 2 hours each session. If they did that honestly and consistently, I would proceed with the estate update. Marcus looked at Renee. Something passed between them. "Of course, Dad," he said. "Family is what matters. We're happy to do that." Renee smiled and said it sounded meaningful. I called the program coordinator the next morning. Her name was Janet Osei, 54 years old, patient and perceptive, with 30 years of experience teaching trades and technical skills to adults and young people. I told her I was bringing my son and daughter-in-law in as volunteers. I did not tell her why. The first session was awkward. Marcus had no patience for the slow work of explaining concepts to a 17-year-old who was building his first circuit board. I watched him from across the room. He smiled when Janet was nearby, checked his phone when she wasn't. Renee sat beside a young woman who was preparing a college application and offered comments about presentation rather than substance. She was gone to the bathroom twice in 90 minutes. On the drive home, Marcus said, "This is fine, Dad. We're happy to be here. It's just a lot of time when there's so much we could be helping you with directly." "This is how you help me," I said. He said nothing for the rest of the drive. The weeks passed. They continued showing up to the sessions, doing the minimum that would register as presence without registering as effort. Janet mentioned to me privately that Marcus seemed disengaged. One of the students, a quiet 16-year-old named Tyler who was working toward a trades apprenticeship, told me that the man who came with me didn't seem to like being there. I thanked Tyler and told him I appreciated his honesty. At the house, the requests escalated. The $300,000 for the startup came back up 3 times, each time with slightly different framing. A loan, then an investment, then just bridge financing. A few months, fully secured. I said I was still thinking about it each time. Renee began asking questions about the house itself, whether I had considered downsizing, whether the equity might be useful for other purposes. One evening, I came home to find them in the kitchen, speaking quietly. They didn't hear me come in through the side door. Marcus said, "3 months is too long. We need to move this along," Renee said. "Just keep being patient. He's lonely. He's older. He's going to come around. We're the only family he has left," Marcus said. "If he doesn't move on the will by next month, we take the legal route." Evelyn said, "Filial piety cases can work in BC if we frame it right." I stood in the hallway for a moment. Then I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water and said goodnight. That night, I emailed Dr. Marsh with a detailed summary of what I had heard. She replied within the hour. "That confirms premeditated financial motivation. Preserve the note. We have more than enough now." There is an annual dinner held every spring by the Vancouver Engineering and Technology Foundation. A black tie event at the Fairmont Hotel, Vancouver. 250 guests. Industry leaders, 10-graded, and maxes, X's, academics. Representatives from major firms. I had been invited for years and rarely attended. This year, the organizing committee had asked me to accept a service recognition award for the mentorship work I'd done through the community college program. They had announced it publicly in their newsletter 3 weeks before the event. Marcus saw the announcement. His face, when he mentioned it to me, told me everything. "We should come, Dad. As a family. It would mean a lot to be there for you." He paused. "It would mean a lot to us. People should know we're rebuilding things." I told him I would arrange tickets. I called the event organizers that afternoon and asked whether the venue's AV setup could support a brief audio presentation during my remarks. They said yes. I asked whether the local press typically covered the evening. They said yes, usually 2 or 3 reporters from the business section. I spent the following 2 weeks preparing. The event was on a Friday in late March. The Fairmont Ballroom was everything it always is: high ceilings, chandelier light, the sound of 200 people performing their best versions of themselves over cocktails and canapes. Marcus and Renee arrived with me, dressed well, shaking hands, smiling for the few people who recognized my name from the Meridian announcement. I watched them work the room and felt nothing in particular. Dinner was served. The foundation president gave a speech about the importance of mentoring the next generation. Then he introduced me. I walked to the podium. I looked out at 250 people in evening clothes. Marcus and Renee were at a table to my left, center row. Marcus looked confident. He had decided this was going to be a good evening. I thanked the foundation. I talked about Patricia, about what she believed about the obligation people with skills had to pass those skills along. I talked about the students in the mentorship program, Tyler, and the others who showed up twice a week to learn things that weren't glamorous, but were real and useful, and theirs. Then I said that I wanted to talk about something else. About family. About what it means and what it costs. I told the room that my son had not spoken to me for 12 years. That the last conversation we had ended with him using his mother's name as a weapon to try to take something from me. That 3 days after my patent sale became public record, he appeared at my door with suitcases. I described the weeks that had followed, the requests, the volunteer sessions, the overheard conversation in the kitchen. Then I nodded to the AV technician. Marcus's voice filled the ballroom through the ceiling speakers. A perfectly clear recording from my kitchen. 3 months is too long. We need to move this along. Then Renee. He's lonely. He's older. He's going to come around. We're the only family he has left. Then Marcus again. If he doesn't move on the will by next month, we take the legal route. The room was completely silent. I clicked again. A second clip, from a conversation in the living room 2 weeks earlier. Marcus, very clearly. The house alone is worth over $1 million. If we can get power of attorney before he changes his mind. Renee's voice cut in on the recording. Keep it down. I turned off the audio. British Columbia's Privacy Act permits the recording of conversations in which you are a participant, I said. I was in the room. Both recordings are entirely legal. Marcus was on his feet. His face had gone the color of old paper. That's out of context, he said. His voice was too loud. People at nearby tables shifted in their chairs. You don't understand what we were. You're welcome to explain the context, I said. I have 3 more clips if it would help. He sat down. A security staff member had moved to the edge of the room. I returned to the microphone. I'm donating $250,000 to this foundation tonight, specifically to fund a paid mentorship stipend for students in trades and technical programs who can't afford to take unpaid training positions. This is in Patricia's name. She believed that the best thing you could do with anything you had earned was direct it toward people who were earning their own way. I stepped back from the podium. The applause started slowly and then filled the room completely. Marcus and Renee left before dessert. I heard later from someone near the exit that he had knocked over a glass on his way out. I did not follow them. When I got home that night, the guest room had been cleared. They had taken their suitcases. A key I had given Marcus was on the kitchen counter. Dr. Marsh called the following Monday. Their lawyer has been in touch. They're claiming defamation, invasion of privacy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. What do you recommend? Exactly nothing. The recordings are legal. Every statement you made was demonstrably true and supported by evidence. We file a comprehensive response and let them look at the costs of pursuing this. My estimate is they drop it within 60 days. She was right. 53 days after the filing, their lawyer withdrew. The court issued a cost award in my favor of $8,000, which I donated to the college mentorship program. I moved through the spring quietly. I had already been thinking about leaving the North Vancouver house. It was too large for one person, and it held more of Patricia in it than I could comfortably tend to on my own. I found a 2-bedroom condominium in the Kitsilano neighborhood, hardwood floors, good southern light, walking distance to the seawall, and 3 very good bookstores. I moved in May. The new building had a residence garden on the rooftop, where a retired teacher named Helen grew tomatoes with single-minded intensity and invited anyone who expressed the slightest interest to come help. I began going up on weekend mornings. Gerald, my chess partner, made the drive across the bridge once a week. Janet from the college called occasionally to update me on the students we'd worked with. Tyler had been accepted into a 4-year electrical engineering technology program at BCIT. He sent me a message to let me know. I kept it. David Fong called in July. Final update, he said. Marcus and Renee left Calgary. From what I can track, they're in Ontario now, Toronto area. The eviction went through. The startup registration was dissolved in April. Renee filed to adjust their joint debt repayment structure through a consumer proposal. It'll take them years to clear. I poured coffee and stood at the window, looking out over the neighborhood. I did not feel the satisfaction I might have imagined. I felt something quieter, an acknowledgement of facts. The system had behaved the way the physics said it would. There's one more thing, David said. A letter arrived at my office for you. Return address is Toronto. Send it. I said. It arrived 4 days later, a plain white envelope in an express post sleeve from David's office. I recognized the handwriting as Marcus's, neater than I remembered, more careful, like someone who had drafted it more than once. I took it to the rooftop garden on a Sunday afternoon and sat in one of the old wooden chairs beside Helen's tomato steaks. I held it for a while before I opened it. It was 2 pages, handwritten. He didn't ask for anything. I want to say that first because it was the first thing I noticed. He wrote that he understood I would not respond and that he was not writing expecting one. He wrote that the evening at the Fairmont had been the clearest moment of his life. That hearing his own voice played back in that room had been like being shown a photograph of something he already knew, but had been refusing to look at directly. He wrote that he had been wrong 12 years ago, that he had used his mother's memory as a weapon, and that he had understood, even in the moment, exactly what he was doing, and had done it anyway. That coming to my house after the patent sale had not been the impulse of a son who missed his father, that he and Renee had discussed it the same week the news article appeared and had made a deliberate plan, and that there was no version of the truth in which that was anything other than what I had said it was. He wrote, "You said you loved me but didn't trust me. I spent a long time thinking those two things couldn't both be true at the same time. Now, I think I understand that they can. I'm sorry it took this long and this much damage to get there." He wrote that he was working a project management job in Scarborough, ordinary work, reasonable pay, the kind of job that didn't have a pitch deck attached to it. That Renee had gone back to her family in Edmonton. That they were separating. That he was starting to think the most honest thing he could do with the next part of his life was find out what he was actually capable of without leveraging someone else to get there. The letter ended, "I don't expect anything from you. You protected yourself from me, which was the correct thing to do. I hope the work you're doing matters to people. I think it already does." I folded the letter. I held it on my lap and looked out over the rooftop garden, over the neighborhood, toward the water in the distance. Helen was on the far side of the garden tying up a vine that had grown past its stake. Two young women from the 4th floor were reading in chairs near the planter boxes. A child somewhere below was making the specific sound children make when they find something worth running toward. I did not write back. Some doors stay closed for good reasons, even when the person on the other side finally understands why they were locked. But I kept the letter. I placed it in the same drawer as the birthday card I had written and never sent, the one from the year I still had an address to send it to. Both in the drawer together. Acknowledgement doesn't always require a response. Sometimes it just requires being preserved. That autumn, the Patricia Cole Mentorship Bursary was established through the foundation, funded by my donation, and matched by 2 additional donors who had been at the Fairmont that evening and had called afterward to ask how they could contribute. It would provide 12 students per year with a paid training stipend while completing their technical apprenticeships. Janet called to tell me the first cohort had been selected. Tyler was one of them. I went to the college the following Tuesday for the regular session. Sat beside a young woman named Amara, who was learning mechanical drafting on a software program I had used a version of 30 years ago. She had good instincts and a habit of second-guessing them that I recognized from myself at her age. I told her that the instincts were the part worth keeping. On the drive home along the North Shore, the mountains were clear above the city in the way they sometimes are in October, close and specific and permanent. I had lived most of my life in this city. I had built a valve system in a basement for 20 years that most people would never hear of, and that would prevent industrial failures in pipelines running underground nobody ever looked at. I had lost Patricia to an illness that moved faster than medicine. I had lost my son to choices he made and I made, and neither of us could unmake. What remained was this: a condominium with good light, a rooftop garden with someone else's tomatoes, a chess partner who drove across a bridge once a week, students who showed up to learn things that were useful and real, work that moved in the right direction. The letter from Marcus was in a drawer in my desk. The birthday card was beside it. I didn't know if he would become someone trustworthy. That was not my work to do. His life was his to build or not, the same way mine had always been mine. What I knew was this: the cargo had arrived where it was supposed to go. That was enough. That had always been enough. If this story stayed with you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Write in the comments what time it is where you are. I read every one. To hear the next story, click the box on the left.